What is up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? It's your boy Goblin, and today we're coming in with a hoot and a holler, a true banger. Today we're talking about how to have a good acid trip. Now listen, I made a video years ago talking about how to stop a bad trip that did really well, and I got a lot of positive feedback on it. But as of lately, especially lately, pretty much every time I live stream, I'll have someone come into my chat, at least one person, and say something along the lines of, "Hey Goblin, I'm so-and-so years old, I'm about to trip for the first time, do you have any tips, you know? Or what should I do?" And I'm tired of answering that question every stream, so we're making the definitive answer videos. In this video, we're going to go through all of my little tips and tricks on how to have a nice, fun acid trip. Now, this video is mainly meant for first-timers out there, or people who maybe are tripping alone for their first time, you know? Like, maybe it's your first time without a trip sitter or something like that. This video is meant for you kind of people. Hey, hope you guys enjoy this video. Drop a like if you do, and also drop a comment with some suggestions on how to have a good trip. Hey, what's your favorite shit to do while tripping? Let me know. Let's dive right into it. And also, hey, smack the fuck out of that like button. If this hits like 2K likes by the time I wake up, we'll drop the next episode of Trap House Tales tomorrow, dude. So hey, I'm going to bed right after this, dude. So hey, y'all are on a time crunch, dude. But either way, let's dive right into it. So, first and foremost, before you even decide when to dose, right? Typically, whenever it's going to be your first time tripping or one of your first times tripping, right? Because like I said earlier, if you're watching this video, chances are you haven't really tripped much, if ever, before. You have to weigh out when you're going to do it, right? Daytime, nighttime, what day, that kind of shit. And I think it explains itself that you got to pick like a weekend or a day where you're off, right? But then comes the question of whether to trip at day or at night. And I always recommend to trip during the day unless you're really experienced, right? Nature is nice as fuck, and it's even nicer when you're tripping. And in my opinion, at least, I felt like whenever I could feel myself maybe starting to get ready to have a bad trip, going outside on a nice day would always alleviate that immediately when I'm tripping sack. Just looking up at the sun like a fucking idiot, burning my eyes, dude, but having the time of my life, being like, dude, the sun, he's smiling at me, dude. Like, just having a wonderful fucking time made it all okay. But at night, going outside can be kind of overwhelming, and you can almost get, like, lost, if that makes sense, pretty quickly, right? Because I don't know, there's not a ton of beauty to appreciate outside at night, right? And when you're tripping balls, that's really the kind of mindset you're in. You know, you like to see pretty colors and pretty things. And nighttime doesn't hold a lot of that, right? So, in my opinion, trip during the day, right? Now, the next thing I want to talk about in this video is trip sitters. This is something that I've seen a lot of people talk about, right? Everyone's like, oh, you got to have a trip sitter. And on my first trip, I did have a trip sitter. But what I will say is this. Your trip sitter should be tripping with you. Your trip sitter should not just be like a sober person who's there. Your trip sitter should be tripping balls alongside you. And here's why. On my first trip, right, my trip sitter was my friend Kyle. And Kyle, he's a psychedelic animal. This motherfucker has eaten a lot of acid, a lot of sugar cubes, a lot of Molly, all sorts of shit in his life, right? And I remember my first time tripping, he was talking me through a lot of the effects, right? So, for example, he told me, when I first, like, really hit my come up, he was like, dude, close your eyes real quick and tell me what you see. And I remember when he told me to do that, I was like, holy fucking shit. Because, like, my eyes were wide open. I was so focused on my surroundings, I never would have thought to just close my eyes and hold it, right? But once I did, I was just seeing the craziest shit, and it was so cool, you know? And we're talking about it. And it's like, it's little things like that, you know? That you're not going to instinctually know to do when you're tripping, that someone who is experienced in tripping balls alongside you can help you understand to do, right? It's really important to, if you're having a trip sitter, they got to be tripping too. Like, you can have a sober one, but it kind of kills the vibe, you know? Because in my experience, this kind of segues into the next tip as well. You should never be the only guy tripping at the function, right? If you're planning to, you know, take a tab and maybe it's just you and one other homie, don't then, you know, you and your homie go to a function where, like, nobody else is taking acid, right? Always try to keep your circle or your plans for that day, like, almost entirely based around psychedelics, right? So, like, if you're inviting people over, make sure they're tripping too, you know? You all got to be on the same kind of playing field, because you got to understand, like, from a sober person's perspective, or from someone who isn't tripping's perspective, someone who's tripping is just always going to want to do something different or act differently, right? And that, like, you just can't help it, you know? Like, when you're tripping, you're just very different. Everyone is. Nobody can help that, right? Some people trip so much, that's just how they are, but either way, you know? It's always nice to not have that conflict of interest of, like, one guy tripping balls and being like, dude, let's go walk around the block for 6 hours and look at leaves, you know? And then you got the other dude who's just high as fuck, and he's just trying to play Nazi zombies, but homeboy's trying to go look at the fucking oak tree 4 blocks over, you know? It gets ugly real fast, right? So make sure that pretty much your entire social circle there is tripping with you, or at least doing something where they're down to get lit with you, you know? It doesn't have to be acid, but I mean, at least make sure they're down to have a good time, right? Now, the next thing I want to talk about here is very important. When planning your trip, never make a very strict plan. I know sometimes I used to, like, try to kind of plan out and talk, like, almost talk up my trips with my homies. I could be like, oh, dude, let's take this tab, and then we'll go do this, and then we'll go here, you know? We're like, oh, dude, it would be fun if we, like, ate these tabs and fucking went to Top Golf, dude. And every time I made a plan, like a set plan, it would never come through when I was tripping, because you just can't plan shit like that, you know? Like, you can't follow through on shit you're obligated to do when you're absolutely drooling tripping sack, right? It's just not possible. The best way to go about it is fucking wing it, right? Pop a tab, let it hit you, sit down with your friend group who's equally as fucked up as you, and then decide, you know, have a little democratic discussion, you know, have a little debate about it, right? Send it to the vote, you know, send it to Congress, and vote on what you guys want to do. Because I found, like I said earlier, pretty much never do I ever follow through on acid plans, right? Like plans for an acid trip. But at the same time, some of my favorite, like, drug-related memories or trip-related memories are just spontaneous shit that me and my friends just got up and went and did while we were tripping, right? Because when you're tripping, you're gonna do stupid fucking shit that you'd never be down to do when you're sober, right? Like, stupid shit that is normally awful is now fun as fuck, and you have to be prepared for that, right? That's the main part about planning, right? Now, getting into the actual trip here, right? Let's say you've got all the planning part done, like I just talked about. Let's say you just followed everything I've talked about. You got the shit planned out. Now you've popped your tab. It's down the fucking hatch, dude. Let's say an hour and a half passes. Look at you. You're tripping sack. Now, a couple things to keep in mind. A, the orange juice thing. Now, there's a lot of debate around this topic, around whether it's placebo effect or drinking orange juice actually makes you trip harder. All I will say is this: placebo effect or not, every time I was tripping, if I took a sip of orange juice, I would, like, physically feel myself tingle a little more. And I liked that. So my recommendation is, everyone take a little sip of OJ. Sure, maybe it is placebo effect, but who cares? It's kind of cool. I don't know. It gave me a special little tingle. Like, it made me feel like I was, like, in, like, a rocket ship, and they just accelerated a little bit more once I took that sip, you know? The G-force just went up a little bit, just one little tick, you know? You know, like, obviously there's probably not a ton of science behind this one, but for real, if you guys have ever heard this rumor, and if you haven't, it's a fairly common rumor that drinking orange juice will make you trip harder, right? Take a sip and find out. Now, another thing that will make you trip harder that you got to be very aware of, and I've actually mentioned this in my How to Stop a Bad Trip video as well, but it's good to reiterate, is, once again, smoking weed has the opposite effect when you're tripping, right? Smoking, like, weed and acid, they have synergy, but not in the way you'd expect. Like, if you smoke a blunt, you're going to Jupiter, right? This is probably one of the only times I'll encourage this, but if you're having a horrible trip and you really, really need to stop it, a benzo really is the way to go. You know, I can't stress that enough. A benzo really is the way to go in that department, right? But otherwise, I'll never advocate for that. But, you know, after watching this video, you shouldn't have that happen. So all I'm saying is, for my first couple trips, I usually had an emergency bar with me, right? I like my first couple trips, I'd show up to the function with emergency Zan just in case, you know? But after I got the hang of tripping, I kind of didn't need that, right? And as you guys start to trip more and more, if you guys do enjoy it, you kind of get the hang of controlling your trips, right? And it'll get to the point where you can actually just have a good time and have a fucking blast and really control your emotions throughout the trip, right? At first, it's kind of overwhelming. You pop a tab and it feels like you just lose fucking control for 12 hours, right? Feels like you're just drooling and tweaking. But the cool thing about acid is that as time goes on and you get more experience with it, that experience never really goes away, right? Like, you'll always know how to handle yourself when you're tripping, right? Like, sure, your tolerance might go down, but at the end of the day, you've already been to that point, right? You've crossed that little plateau. You tripped before, right? The other nice thing is, once you learn to, really control your trip, that's when you can really have fun, dude. That's when you can make a good time out of nothing, right? For example, with me, when I was in my peak psychedelic use, I would just be at home popping tabs, sitting at my desk, not leaving my room, and playing League of Legends, right? And I would make a ball out of it. But when I first started tripping, that would have been a recipe for disaster, right? I would have had a horrible trip. I would have felt cramped up, but because I was at the point where I could kind of control my mindset when I was tripping, dude, I could have fun doing whatever. And that's the main thing, right? It's always very important to kind of try to just sit back, take a very eased approach to tripping, and have fun with it. There might be some people out there who will tell you, like, oh, really try to discover yourself and open your third eye, bro. That's not what I think tripping's about. If you want to do that, you can, and that's cool. But that kind of stuff can be overwhelming for a new user, and that should never be what you're coming in for. Like, if you're first-time tripper, right, you should never be coming into this like, oh, I'm here for spiritual enlightenment, because you need to know how to actually control your trip to ever get to that point, right? You have to start off just sending it, just having a good time. Pop that tab and go cuckoo bananas, dude. Have a hoot. Have a blast of a time, right? That's what it's all about. And in order to do that, you got to be laid back. You got to be with homies who are tripping. You got to have the right environment. You can't have too strict of plans. And you got to follow the tips in this video, dude. It's simple. It's very easy. Really, it's not hard, right? I'll also have in the description link to my how to stop a bad acid trip video in case that interests you guys as well. You never know. Some of you guys stumbling upon this may have a bad acid trip. But hey, hope this video did help you guys out. Drop a like if it did, and also drop a comment with some tips on what you guys think are some good ways to ensure you have a great trip. Hey, thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate you all. I will see you guys next time. Peace.